Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whatever time it is and where you're at this very moment when you're watching this presentation. My name is Maverick Y. Zhang, and I'm a third-year PhD student in the Department of Language and Literacy Education at the University of Georgia. Today, I'm going to be talking about how an embodied multimodal curriculum supported college students from various backgrounds in making sense of or unmaking sense of disciplinary ways of doing and being, and meanwhile critically engaging with some of the dominant discourses in both our school context and society at large. So over the past couple of decades, in both K-12 and college classrooms, students from various linguistic and socioeconomic backgrounds are often expected to make sense of specialized discourse and complex social issues with limited opportunities to engage in hands-on or multimodal activities. And the problem is that, for example, when students are going to college, not all of them have what's being called immediate and available access to the various sources of cultural, social, or material capital. So we cannot just assume that students are all able to interpret, embody, or remix disciplinary knowledge and literacy by just attending lectures or reading textual visual resources. And so to address some of these problems, daunting challenges, a number of embodied and multimodal approaches have been developed and used in various contexts. For example, there has been work written by Stephanie Jones on embodied literacy, which was drawing on both critical theories and post-humanist and new materialist theories. And also multimodal composing from Shin and Simasko, and also Severin and Harman developed the systemic functional linguistics informed embodied teaching learning cycle. And I myself have also been written on embodiment and multimodality. So a lot of teaching practitioners and some of my teacher friends, they ask me, okay, this is good, this is great, but how does it look like? How it actually worked in a classroom context? And these are some of the issues that I'll be addressing in today's presentation. So the research that will be discussed in this presentation is an 8-month-long ethnographic case study conducted in a teacher education course at a large R1 university in southeastern US. There were in total 19 students in the class from 5 different countries, including China, Dominican Republic, Iran, Kazakhstan, and the US. So the course was primarily focusing on introducing students to theories like systemic functional linguistics, multimodality, youth participatory action research, as well as related teaching, learning, and research practices. And because of the white part component, the course was taught both in a classroom on the university campus and on site at a local public high school. In collaboration with an in-service ELA teacher. So the college students get to work with high school students in a high school classroom. So the curriculum in this course was developed primarily based on the embodied multimodal praxis from Severin and Harman, which was mostly informed by systemic functional linguistics and social culture theories from Vygotsky's work. So, so because of this embodied multimodality, we had a range of embodied multimodal activities throughout the semester, like mapping, theater performance, guided campus walk, and so forth. So in this presentation, thinking with Scollin and Jones' work on mediated discourse analysis, I'll be addressing, first of all, embodied multimodal activities as part of the shared discourse itineraries, and how along these shared discourse itineraries, students' ways of doing and being evolved. And also how students manage to critically engage with some of the dominant discourses in specific socio-historical context. So what is mediated discourse analysis? Or to say how it works in my work? First of all, the reason why I use the abbreviation mediated DA is because a lot of my coworkers, they also work on what's being called multimodal discourse analysis. Just to differentiate that, so I'm not using MDA, I use mediated DA in my work. I think mediated DA is really an approach towards discourse that goes beyond the discourse itself, or what's being called representations. So what we really look at is the discourse in action, and also our material world or tools that are involved in those actions we take. For example, if we use mediated DA as an analytical framework, the analytical unit is neither the discourse itself nor the actions we take, but the mediated actions in which material or semiotic tools we use, the actions we take, and our past and future trajectories of doing and being all come into play in specific social, historical, and spatial contexts. And here, our past and future trajectories of doing and being is what was coined by Scollon as discourse itineraries. So what we do, or the ways in which we engage with our discursive practices, the material world at one particular moment, can always be viewed as taking place at the intersection of multiple nonlinear discourse itineraries. Which is, according to both Scollon and Jones, the history of a chain of actions that have become practiced over time through the history of social actor or groups of social actors' ways of doing, knowing, and being. And another construct I'd like to mention is the concept of historical body or historical bodies. Which was developed by Scollon by drawing on both Berdoux's work on habitus and also Nishida's work on intelligibility and the philosophy of nothingness. So I think Nishida's work is particularly important here because Scollon didn't really see what's being called habitus as something that actually exists, something that can be captured or even talked about. So it was with Nishida's concept historical body, Scollon conceptualized our ways of being as something that is always changing, moving, or becoming. And that's why sometimes I would say becoming instead of being. And also in this research, what I'm looking at is really the evolving ways of doing and being. So here we're gonna be looking at a couple of examples from the research data. For example, this is part of the interview conversation I had with one of the students from Dominican Republic, Kim. This was while she was sharing how she felt at the very beginning of the semester when she just started taking the course. And as you can see, like many other college students, Kim started the course with no background in multimodality, SFL, and it was particularly challenging for Kim, also because of her positionalities as a newcomer or what's being called anxious outsider in the US. As Kim, she herself reflected on it. She even thought about dropping out of the class first semester in a foreign country, in a foreign university. She needs to get good grades. And I think this kind of positionality, or to say ways of being and perceiving, is not just how we or the institutions position Kim as such, but also how some of the complicated journal articles or the certain linguistic or semiotic choices in our textbooks position Kim as a newcomer or academic outsider. And also, as you can see, even Kim herself kind of saw herself as an outsider and was quite nervous, which almost lead to the doing, the action, the possible action of dropping the class. Well, luckily, our ways of being and knowing would always change as we engage with the others, the material world, as time goes by. So while we were moving towards the end of the semester, as you can see in this image, it's from part of our classroom video recordings. The professor was preparing students for their independent construction of a multimodal curriculum for middle school learners. And it was at this very moment, while the professor was talking, Kim raised up her hand, shifted the topic, and posed questions regarding multimodality and the ways in which we center youth voices and interests, as you can see here in this classroom conversation. So it can be seen that Kim does not look or sound like a newcomer or outsider anymore. She kind of started grappling with, or to say, talking about concepts and theories like multimodality and culturally sustaining pedagogy in a way that is related to the subject matter at that very moment in that institutionalized space. And of course, I would say that this kind of change, or to say becoming, the actions Kim took at that moment would never happen overnight or emerge from nowhere. And we can't just assume it's because, oh, they read a couple of articles. For example, both Kim and another student I interviewed named Yan from mainland China, both of them told me that it was really an ongoing process throughout their trajectories of reading articles, having a guided campus walk, singing along with a local rapper and activist, being physically in a local public high school, working or interacting with students. And so, for example, when I was interviewing Yan, she directly pointed out that the ways in which we physically move in between the college classroom and the high school context and interacting high schoolers really created some kind of a venue for her to make sense or unmake sense of her ways of knowing or relating to the others or positionality, as we can see in this transcript. And I think this actually ties back to one of the key focuses of mediated discourse analysis. As Scullin emphasized, one of the things we do with mediated DA is to trace those nonlinear pathways or trajectories of our social actions, our engagement or entanglement with the material world and other social actors. So actions at these particular moments in particular places, such as Kim raising up the hand, shifting the topic, Yan started asking open-ended questions, repositioning herself in the high school classroom, can really be seen as taking place at the intersection of their shared and distinct discourse itineraries. As we can see in both of these conversations or interactions, along these itineraries, some kind of social identities and social relations are enacted. And certain structures or power relations at these sites of engagement are also produced or reproduced. And here's another example. So this was a movie session in our class, which was planned together with a couple of other embodied multimodal activities. So we invited this film producer to introduce his movie Below Botwing, which was very much focused on the local history of slavery and race, as well as the ongoing institutionalized racial discourse on the university campus. And one of the focal points of the movie is this memorial monument that was built by the university in tribute to the human remains of local Black residents who had been buried on the university campus, but were physically removed during an expanding construction of an academic building. And the building of this monument drew public attention, especially because the university has long been refusing to acknowledge its historical involvement in slavery and was literally rushing to bury these reinterred human remains in a historically white cemetery without even noticing the public. And therefore, what was also featured in the movie was a protest organized and participated by local county commissioners, social activists, and college students, and was taking place on that day during the revealing of the monument. And so both Kim and Yan in our interviews told me that the film session and some of the following multimodal activities in a lot of ways inform what they do and how they perceive themselves in relation to the others, the university campus, the history of the space and place. As you can see in this interview conversation. So after the film session, Kim literally went back and talked with her friends, roommates, and they were all shocked. And this was especially shocking to Kim, also because, as what she told me later in the interview, self-identified as someone who's born and raised in mainland China. Neither she nor her friends have ever engaged with this part of the history here in the South. And I would say that this kind of knowing, listening, and talking often come with material consequences. So not just the discursive part, but also the material part. Also, it's always what we do that matters. And so, for example, in this case, Yan told me that a month after the end of the semester, she literally took a walk and tried to find that monument. So the social actors, both Yan and I myself, are taking the social actions here, as we can see in this conversation. Well, I think at this moment, while Yan and I were having this interview conversation, we were still, or to say again, in the process of unmaking sense of our knowing and perceiving our entanglements with the memorial monument, the site of the memorial monument, and how the history of slavery and the discourse of race on the university campus are becoming both visible and invisible. And I think moments like these and the actions we take at these moments would always happen across multiple sites of engagement at different times. So I don't think they can be analyzed in isolation with each other. And here are some implications or what's being called findings from the research. First of all, as what I've shown in some of the examples, our embodied or multimodal activities can be really viewed as part of the shared discourse itineraries across various times and sites of engagement. And along these itineraries of actions and discourse, as we saw in some of the examples, students from various backgrounds were supported in making sense and unmaking sense of theories and practices in connection to their own lived experiences, identifications, and positionalities. And there were also multiple entry points created along these trajectories, itineraries, for students to critically engage with some of the dominant discourses, be it on institutionalized racial discourse, the neoliberal push in education, or just our taken for granted teacher-student binaries. And I would say that a lot of these entry points, dialogical spaces, would often go well beyond the classroom context. A lot of them would extend to our everyday lives, our everyday social practices in the past, at the present, and in the future. Well, thank you. So if you have any questions about this presentation or my research or just in general mediated discourse analysis, feel free to reach out to me, contact me at the maverickzane@uga.edu.